Here. Now I've got the record down. This is Carol Haddock, and I'm interviewing Kate Katterle in Pullman, Washington, and today's date is August 30th, 1999. I have some pictures here that your brother Carl had sent up.
Yes, he told me that my father had given them to you.
And so I was going to show them to you. Maybe you could give me an idea of why he'd maybe have owned some of these pictures. That one looks like some sort of a blacksmith shop or a metalworking shop.
Well, I honestly don't know much about these pictures.
Okay.
I don't know what, just why, of course, my father, I mean, it was his first job. Now where is this? This is a railroad, isn't it?
Now, we don't believe it's Potlatch.
No.
Someone wondered if maybe it was Beauville or Elk River.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because, and yet, in Beauville, we lived right across from the railroad tracks. I could look out the front door and see the railroad. And there's the railroad. This could almost have been our house. Because the house, I could walk right up into the woods.
Mm-hmm. So you think it could possibly be an early Beauville picture?
Yes, I do.
Now this one here, I believe is Potlatch.
That is Potlatch, yes. That's certainly early, isn't it? I wonder if those were the moving boarding house that I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what's down here.
It looks like there's some stacks of lumber down along the rail bed there. Not sure just how early these look like very early pictures.
Oh, yes. Well, as I've said, my father started with me. Deary was the general manager.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right.
When my father started, he knew the lumber business. I mean, he knew timber.
Mm-hmm.
But he was not a good administrator.
Deary?
Deary.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that town was named for him. And then he brought in Laird to take over. And Laird really didn't know much about lumber either. You know, in some ways, Potlatch was an experiment. It was the largest white pine sawmill in the world, and it was in our geography book. I was going to mention that, and that's one reason we were so proud of it, because, well, we're just not living in a little old town, we're a big town, we're in that block.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually, as I've read, and I think it may Peterson or someone said this, that the mill was almost obsolete when they built it.
Oh, is that right?
Now, a couple of other stories that I didn't even tell you. When we were in Claremont, California, that summer when my husband was teaching there, we had some neighbors who'd been in China for years and years. A delightful older couple, and they called on us. And you know, you always start, where are you from, and so forth. And I just said I was born in Idaho. And this man said, well, you know, I had a relative who came to Idaho. He was in the lumber business, had a very big position with the lumber company. He said it was a funny little town. I said, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Well, my husband and I, he said, it was Potlatch. So, of course, we had a lot of fun. And his name was Laird. So, Laird was a distant relative of his.
I see. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Now, this picture with these tents must be in a camp, and I wondered if you recognized anyone in those pictures.
Well, I wouldn't have known any of these people, you see.
Uh-huh.
I don't see my father here.
Get back. See?
No, I don't, I'm sure I don't know any. But I'm sure that these are men that he worked with. He thought a lot of them. And he would carry the payroll, the pay. Well, every month he went out to these camps. He'd walk 15 miles a day.
Oh my.
And he would stay over. He would stay with the men. He'd eat with the men. He didn't. My parents were like people. They didn't put on about anything, and they called him the Big Chief. So these people meant a lot to him.
Mm-hmm. Now you say they lived in a log cabin.
Yes.
Um,
And I don't know which camp.
uh-huh.
I don't have any idea, and have no pictures of that.
Uh-huh.
That's why I'd love to get my hands on that book.
Uh-huh.
There might be something in there.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if he tells about people that were there.
You know, I've seen the book and just glanced through it, so I can't tell you how much he says about people. But here's one, and
Now this is my father right here.
right,
That's my father.
Carl had identified him in that one.
Yes.
Now that must be when he first started there. Do you think that would have been a...
Well, it could have been any of those years because, of course, he was there quite a few years. See, I was born there, and then my first and second grade there, and then Bovill, so it could have been any of those years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any idea of the dates.
Okay. These men standing
There
in
he
front
is
of him.
again.
He's the tall one there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now this very probably would have been an office, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that now, see, it's hard to tell what those are, but I imagine that he probably, you see, I was never out in any of those.
Mm-hmm.
We never got out there, and it's too bad.
Did he have to spend long periods of time out of the camps, or?
No, he would go out, I would have to guess. I doubt if he even stayed a week.
Uh-huh. Now, do you recognize any of these people? There are names on the back. There's an Arthur Peterson. I know you spoke of the Petersons.
No, I don't recognize any of those names. That's still the same class, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. There's an Arthur Peterson. Does that ring a bell?
I don't know what happened to that family. I didn't keep in touch with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember any children.
Mm.
If they had any, I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
course, they lived up a knob hill, you see.
Oh, uh-huh. Now, what was Mr. Peterson? Oh, he was
He was a foreman.
he was the foreman at
He
the
was
mill?
a foreman out at the mill.
Mhm. Now, these pictures are Potlatch
Oh,
community.
wonderful.
Here's the Union Church.
That's the old Union Church, isn't it?
Yes. Was the Union Church a wooden church, or was it brick?
I don't know. I remember the inside because it was beautiful. And the main worshiping part of the church was, there were rooms along one side with folding doors. So when there was a large program or group, they could push those doors back and seat people there. It was fine. Now there's the library. Now when I went to the library, and the librarian lived near on our street, Mrs. Metcalf. She was a neighbor. And the library was in the basement of the church. That's where the teacher taught. Now what is that?
Now, that is the old high school.
Well, of course, I didn't ever go to high school there, so.
I believe that was just across the street from the elementary school.
I suppose. See, that part I don't remember. Now, that's the office, isn't it? The
Yes.
head office. And you see, my father's office is at the back there.
Back on the first floor.
Yes. I don't know what that is.
That may be just another view of this building. I think this might just be another view of it. Or else it's the hotel. Well, that's what it says, hotel in background.
Now, this is a library, isn't it?
Yes. I believe this was the library in the Union Church.
Gee, I wonder if that could be Mrs. Metcalf. I got, oh,
Went two together there.
yes, that's
It is.
Mrs. Metcalf. Wonderful. Yes, she was a dear lady. She knew how I liked to read, and that's when the Oz books were so popular. And as soon as she got one in, before she even cataloged it, she'd give it to me to read, because she knew I'd read it that night, and she could take it the next day. Oh, I remember her with a great deal of affection. She was right next door to us. I don't remember what her husband did. Now, what is that?
That may be the bank building.
It could be, and I don't remember the bank at all.
See, this says Potlatch State Bank, and from this
I wonder if it's the original,
Mm-hmm.
because that I don't remember. Is that home or?
We're not sure which building that was in. Possibly in the gym. Maybe a smoking room in the gym.
Now this is a gym. There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I learned to turn somersaults. I'd never turned a somersault. That special parade one day, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Gymnasium, huh?
Now, there's showers. They said the showers were downstairs.
That's the office building. That's a church, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's the Catholic Church.
Yes, that was near us when we lived on Oak Street. Now these are homes. This was probably on Nob Hill.
Mm-hmm.
These may have been two, I don't know. These look more like they do on the main. So that shows you the kind of snow we had. Oh, they look familiar to me, but I couldn't point them out, tell you exactly who lived in them. This is all the lumber. Well, you know, people should take more pictures, shouldn't they?
They should.
Or keep them.
Do you remember a Mabel Kelly?
No.
She worked in the office. Was maybe a secretary or for
There was
Blair.
quite a crew in that office. In the main part, there were a lot of secretaries.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were a few private offices, you see. And do you know the company brought out young men from the Ivy League schools. And my father says, now Peterson doesn't agree with that in his book. My father said that's why we got the name Princeton, Yale, and Harvard. They named them for their schools. There was a young bachelor who came for a while and worked in the office. And he had a car, and there weren't many people who had cars. And he loved kids. And late afternoon, he'd come up to our neighborhood, and he'd say, go in and tell your mother I'm taking you to Palouse for an ice cream cone. And he'd fill his car full of these kids, and there we'd go. So you see, again, this reinforces what I call a happy childhood. The people that cared, and people had to care. They just couldn't run off and do all the things they do now. And it just made it a place to grow up.
We've talked about what women did during those days, you know, when their men went to work for the mill. People like your mother.
Yeah, as I've said, she was a social person. She called on people. She had tea parties. My parents entertained. They were very active in the lodge. My mother played cards. She was busy. And I know that very often I would come home from school and Mother wasn't there yet, but I'd know where she was. Before I went to school, she always took me with her. But no, they had to create something. And at that time, and I think about it a lot now, we're so concerned about our young people, about our high schools. We feel that our standards have dropped so. And it isn't the fault of the young people. I think it's the fault of the parents. And now they're going to school or protecting, guarding them. What good is that going to do? Because some of these kids, like this one who did, these two that did these terrible things, the signs were there, but nobody could recognize them. But we've raised our standards. Women must work and the husband must work to fulfill what we think we have to have. We have to have cars, we have to have all the modern things in our homes, and it's all very expensive. And women are not giving. To me, this is the way my husband felt. See, he lost his mother when he was so young, he has no recollection of her. And so he said to me, the most important thing that any woman can ever do is to raise another human being. He said there is no vocation, no profession that equals that ability. And you see, we've taken it for granted. We've taken mothers and housekeepers for granted. Now, during World War, later years, when I was raising my family, as I say, I was very, very busy with social life, with community activities, and I had a great deal of hired help. I hadn't done any laundry or heavy cleaning for years. I paid a woman 25 cents an hour, and she not only would clean, she'd take care of my children. I now have a girl who's worked for me for 15 years, and I still have her come one day a week here, and we go out to lunch, and she helps me with errands. I pay her $10 an hour. Now this, from 25 cents to $10, this is the changes I've seen in my lifetime. And when I think what's ahead of us in 50 years, with these computers taking over, again, I'm not saying that women don't have the right to do things, but do we have to be ashamed of running a home? Do we have to be ashamed of being a mother? Isn't that, my husband made me feel very important. Every time he had a promotion, he always said, we did it. He made me very much a part of his career. He would call me from his office when something unusual happened to tell me. So I always felt we worked as a team. I don't know that everyone can be as lucky as I was. I was lucky. But, and I do think we need, I think there's so many demands on people now that we want too much. And
getting back to the Union Church, you remember it being such a beautiful building?
yes.
And it was quite a community center, is that
Oh,
right?
yes.
They used
Oh,
it for
yes.
graduations?
Well, of course, I was never there for any graduation.
That's true.
But probably. Yes, it certainly was the community center. They built it for that reason, because, well, it was the only building that really could be. Because the gymnasium was used for classes and all. And of course, the lodge, the lodge had a building, and I guess they had room there where they could dance.
You had Sunday school in the Union Church?
Oh, yes. And the Sunday school rooms, I think most of them were in the basement. But I think there were rooms along the side, too.
You said Mrs. Laird was...
Mrs. Laird was superintendent of Sunday school. And my mother taught Sunday school. And of course, I always went to Sunday school with my mother, and she'd tie a nickel in the handkerchief and tie it somewhere so I wouldn't lose it.
Put in the collection plate, or?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I always took part in the programs at the church, and my mother coached me. And then I took part of the programs in the Lutheran church. And I've always said it's one reason I think I majored in speech drama. My mother taught me. I was totally unafraid. I don't know what stage fright is.
Did you take part in any productions as a child? You remember anything in Potlatch that...
Well, there, it was just, it was just church programs mainly that I remember. I did a lot of work in college in plays. Every year I was in a play or two.
Do you remember the movie theater? Did you go to movies in Potlatch?
It was some old building that they made into a theater. And they just had plain wooden seats, and they had somebody play the piano. And I can remember going to the movies, and I remember seeing the comedies, the funny ones. And I remember I was with my parents at the movie, and then they announced that there was the main feature, and then they announced that there would be a comedy, someone that I liked. What was the great comedian? Charlie Chaplin. And I got so excited, and I jumped up and down and clapped my hand, and my father said, be quiet, because the lyrics were sitting back. I was very enthusiastic about things.
Did the Lairds have children?
Yes, they had 2 daughters, and I think they went to private schools. And when I came back here to Pullman to live, one of them was a house mother, one of the sororities for a while. And I should have made an effort to get acquainted with her, but I got very involved when I came back here. I never did. I don't think Laird was a man with a great deal of money. I think he had a good salary, but as I say, I think that it was somewhat of an experiment. And of course there is a Potlatch Lumber Company. It's stationed in different, there's one outlet in Tacoma, I think. Down Lewiston?
Yes. Yes, there's Potlatch has a mill in Lewiston at this time.
And of course that wasn't there when I was a child.
Did you did you travel into Washington to visit family very often?
Well, our travel was very limited. Of course, we didn't have a car. We had relatives in Moscow, and my mother and I used to take the train over. And then we'd go to Palouse, and I'd never heard of Pullman. That was ours. And my grandparents lived on their farms for quite a long time. And my mother would spend 2 weeks every summer, 1 week with one and another week with the other grandparent. So I guess that's the extent of what my traveling would be.
What was the train ride like?
Well, of course they were just plain trains. You know, many, many years later, the Northern Pacific and the Great Northern have beautiful trains into Chicago, which I took many times, where you had roomettes or even bedrooms. There was nothing like that. Of course, we were never on one that way. But I used to get car sick. And I know my father said once he'd take me to Moscow, but he'd never take me again if I got sick. I guess I had kept it. I had motion sickness, I still do.
Did your father take the train out to the camps then? Or did he have
No,
to?
we walked.
Oh, he had to walk.
He would probably take it part way.
Uh-huh.
That part I don't know about. I do know that he walked. He didn't think anything of walking 15 miles a day.
Uh-huh.
And how many days it took him, I don't know that.
Uh-huh.
I just know when he was gone because I missed my papa. I called him Papa. And he always brought me fruit and big donuts from the cook always sent them home for little cake.
Uh-huh.
And I have a vague recollection that we may have gone out to one of them once, but that part I'm very confused about.
Mm-hmm.
My father took me into the mill. I was simply terrified of the noise. So he just took me right out again. So I never saw him.
Do you remember any of your teachers?
I remember my first grade teacher. There is a lady here at Bishop who lives on a ranch. She has a ranch between Potlatch and Moscow. Walzer, Dorothy Walzer. She took, when my first grade teacher retired, she took her place. Dorothy would remember the name. And I can't think of it right now.
Did you enjoyed school out then?
Well, I talked to you about the 5th grade. No, I was not happy in the 1st grade. I was too much of a mother's girl. I was spoiled. And they were very strict, you know. And the teacher said that if we were late, that she would take us in the coat room and switch us. And I started to school one day, and the bell was ringing, and I knew I'd be late, so I went back home and got my mother. And I was afraid of her. And I didn't do well in school my first 2 years. In fact, my report card was very bad. And my mother was very, very concerned about it. And, but the teacher, they would come to me. The teacher did pass me into the 2nd grade. They were neighbors. She and her sister lived on our street. And she promoted me to the 2nd grade. Now, I don't remember much about the 2nd grade. But then my father went up to Beauville, you see, so I started the 3rd grade in Beauville. And when it came time for the report cards, my mother met me after school. And see, this again was before my brother was born. And she knew report cards would be coming out. So she finally asked me if I had it, and I said yes. I showed it to her. And she looked at it. You know, I could walk to that. If I'd gotten out of the car yesterday when we were there recently, we were there, you know, just, did I tell you last Saturday? We went to Vogel and Elk River. I could have walked almost on the street, I think, where we stood. And my mother looked at it and she said, "Why, you can read." I had excellent in everything. And when people talk about reading, see, having been involved in education as long as I have, I've heard these experts on reading from the University of Chicago and everywhere. How do you teach people to read? I have no idea why I learned to read. I just wanted to, I guess. Because this teacher was having a romance with a local bootlegger. And in fact, they eloped. And it was the talk of the town. And her father came to try to annul the marriage. And we kids all went and serenaded them anyway. And she had a little boy who couldn't read, and she sent someone out for a switch. And she put him in a corner back of the screen and switched him. Now my teacher in the 5th grade, the first day, she brought out a long whip of some kind, and she put it on her desk. And she said, "I can use that if I have to." You see, you know, they can't do that anymore. Some people think it might be a good idea if they could. So it's very hard to tell. So when I think of the school, now when I think of the 5th and 6th grade, I was happy because I was doing well. And in fact, I didn't have to take examinations. And my chum and I were the only two excused from not taking examinations. And we didn't even have to go to school that day. And we went down to that store and we bought candy. And we came back and we sat on the street where they could see us from the room eating candy. You know, kids can be real brats, can't they? Now, of course, my mother would have paddled me if she knew that. Oh, my mother paddled me. She'd haul me in the bathroom and take my pants down and paddle me. And I didn't resent it. I knew I deserved it. She didn't really hurt me. It was just the idea of you can't do it. But one time when she was really angry with me, you see, living on Elm Street and the cemeteries, and you see there was a walk way out there, wooden walk. And we kids used to run out at night, and we'd say the last one in the spooks will get, and we'd run so hard. And then we'd watch all these funerals. And I swear that there was a Chinese funeral, but they were ringing bells and doing all kinds of things. And we kids were just agog with this. You see, death didn't mean anything to us. So I decided we were going to have a funeral. And so I dug a hole in our backyard, and I went in and got the doll that my grandfather had given me for Christmas. I didn't like dolls. I liked teddy bears. And I buried that doll, put her in a box and put her in that hole, and then we were going around in a circle singing, "The man from Borneo has just come to town." Well, after a while, my mother always investigated what I was doing. She came out, and she saw that doll down there. So I really got a spanking that time.
Uh-huh.
Well, I started reading, and I never stopped. I had a beautiful library I had to give away when I came up here. I gave it to the Bruce bookstore downtown.
Oh. Well, that was
15 boxes of books.
right. Well, that's
But
wonderful.
I had 3 bookcases.
Do you remember the Chinese and Japanese?
This again, I'm confused because Peterson came over here and talked about his book. And one of my friends, a group of faculty women, went to hear him talk about Potlatch and his book. And then I talked to him afterwards a little bit. And I told him, I got up and talked a little bit about my early days there. And then I said to him, were there Chinese working at the mill? And he said, I've never found any of that information. So whoever it was that came by ringing bells and things, I don't know what it was, who they were.
Yeah, there are some men of Japanese descent we know had worked there. I don't know, if there were Chinese, if, what different nationalities. We don't have much information.
Well, I'm sure that in the mill, probably all of the camps, they recruited from wherever they could.
Do you remember the doctor that helped your mother through your brother's delivery?
I think it was Dr. Thompson, and he did the best he could.
I know the men had insurance, could go to the hospital. Probably the hospital wasn't built then yet.
No, we had no hospital.
Did the doctor?
There was a hospital in Louisville.
Oh, there was a hospital at Beauville. Did you ever go into that hospital? You remember?
Well, my mother had her tonsils removed at that hospital in Beauville. But when I had my tonsils out in Potlatch, I think Dr. Thompson did the surgery just in his office. And of course I was under general anesthetic.
Did the doctor come to your home then for the delivery?
Yes.
Yes,
my brother was delivered at home. Because I remember the day, it was in in February. My brother was born the 25th of February. I'm having to remember now. And we had a blizzard that day. And I was coming home from school with a little friend, and my father was coming down the street. And he called to me and he said, you have a beautiful baby brother. Well, you see, I didn't quite know how I felt about it. I knew that my mother was going to have a baby. She told me that. And I just didn't know how I felt about it. But I became very fond of him. But I was jealous from him. But no, my mother should have been in the hospital. But she wasn't. And when my parents, then later, when my father had his breakdown, he did go to specialists in Spokane. And they tried different things. They just didn't know how to help him. I think a whole lot of it was emotional. Where, people could be pretty complicated. Life is easy for some people, but it isn't for everyone.
You left Potlatch then shortly after your brother was born?
Yes, he was just a baby. And we went out on this farm out of Rockford. And I had to go to school at Rockford High School the first year.
I see.
I stayed with an uncle. And my father came to get me for weekends to come back out there. And then my grandmother offered to take me in Spokane. My grandparents had moved to Spokane. And then my mother got my father off that farm, and we moved to Spokane.
So you must have lived in Rockford maybe 3-4 years?
No, I only went there the 1 year to
Just
high school.
1 year? Where did you go to 7th and 8th grade?
On a farm.
On a farm?
One-room school.
Oh. Near Rockford?
Well, it was between Rockford and Fairfield. I couldn't tell you exactly where it was. Not there anymore. There were about 8 children in the school. I was the only one, the 7th and 8th grades. I had an excellent teacher. I wish I knew what happened to that woman. She really took an interest in me, and she knew I liked to read, and she went to Spokane, her family. She brought books back for me. And I helped her with the little ones. And then she coached me. I had to take state examinations in order to enter high school. And of course, she got old examinations and she could coach me, so I was able to graduate.
Who were some of your childhood friends? Do you remember?
Well, I was